live from the University of Nebraska at Kearney. It's the weekly Allowance where real-world knowledge is discussed. Your future is what matters, and the broke college student is no longer the status quo. Young or old, don't put your future on hold. We welcome you to the show. I'm your host, Luke Rosenklaus, joined by co-host Austin Partridge. Austin, how's it going today?
It's going really well today. I just literally got back moments ago from Lincoln. We had a academic affairs committee meeting for the Board of Regents today. So that went really well. I went to Lincoln last night to prepare for that, and it was good. We got some important issues discussed, and football was talked about a lot. So it was a good meeting today. Luke, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, you're a busy man, much busier than I am today, but good. The week's going well, and Raising Cane's just opened up in Kearney, so that's big news. Hoping to make a stop there this weekend. So really looking forward to that. I'm a big Raising Cane's guy, so anytime I can get that, I'm pretty happy. And the week went by pretty fast, and another one in the books. So everything's going pretty good my way. Today we're going to be discussing with you guys kind of a big topic in our society today, and that's millennials. And me and Austin think that we're a good fit to talk about this topic because we are considered millennials. And that's kind of what we wanted to pose first was what necessarily is a millennial, what defines a millennial, and where do they come from. And pretty much it says, I looked up the definition on Google, and it just says that millennials are a group of people born between the mid-1980s to the early 2000s. And that age range can kind of be debated a little bit. Some people say they're born earlier, some people say they're born later, and then some people say the time frame's a little bit more narrow than that. But that's kind of what Google defined it as and kind of the definition I found for millennials. So like I said, Austin and I are both considered millennials, so what better two people to kind of discuss the topic with you guys today. But today we wanted to just discuss a little bit of the problem with maybe employing millennials, maybe teaching millennials, maybe seeing them in our society, and what things are going right with millennials, what things are going wrong, and kind of where we need to improve and what we need to improve on, and things like that in our society.
Yes, I'm really excited to take a little step away from maybe personal finance and talk about this important issue. I think personal finance and personal money management does have some implications on talking about millennials, and so I think talking about this really encompasses all college students, and so I think it's really important that we do talk about this and we do get everything out on the air. It's so important to discuss this topic because we're in college and it's an issue that we're currently facing, and so in a society that maybe isn't too fond of millennials, it's important to understand some of these implications that people think about millennials, that some issues that we're facing, so that we're better able to go out in the real world and be in a position to deal with these issues.
Yeah, so the first thing we want to touch on is kind of like what do we hear on a daily basis about these problems, and kind of where is the problem, I guess. What is the problem with millennials? And I guess kind of where I wanted to start was I went to this business education conference last week on Wednesday, and we had this panel of business people up. There's a few bankers, a few insurance agents, and a few other business people in our society throughout Nebraska. And they pretty much said it's getting so tough to hire millennials, and it's getting tougher and tougher to manage millennials. And they just found all these problems, and they kind of listed them off, which kind of, I don't know, made this topic apparent to me and made me want to do it for one of our shows. And so I think that's one thing we hear in our society a lot is we hear a lot of employers saying that millennials are so tough to hire and that it is really tough to find smart millennials that want to work hard. That's pretty much the thing they're looking for, is just people that want to show up to work and work while they're at work rather than just sit on their phones or do whatever. A lot of millennials are accused of being entitled, lazy, impatient, and really unmanageable to some employers. And I think one of the biggest things many employers see with millennials is that they lack social skills, that they think that millennials have been raised on Facebook and texting and just kind of non-face-to-face communication. And so they believe the way, obviously, you develop your social skills is by face-to-face interaction, and that they think that our generation, the millennial generation, has had the least of that. And so I would just like to pose kind of an image of what the employer kind of thinks of as what a millennial looks like. And I would say that the image that we get of millennials is a casually dressed slacker rolling into work late on his cell phone, only to complain that there is no room on the office beanbag chairs for him to sit. So that's kind of what I think the image of millennial is, and and kind of just that slacking around, lackadaisical, not really caring about what's going on, and just kind of wants everything handed to them. So I'd say, what are your kind of thoughts about this, Austin?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head with that pretty vivid description of a millennial there. I have a pretty good image in my head. But yeah, I think millennials are considered tough to hire, and it's for several reasons. I think our society has placed a pretty negative image in people's heads about who millennials are and what exactly they want in life. And when I say people, I mean, employers. That's kind of what we're talking about. They think that millennials are self-interested, entitled, lazy, unmanageable, as Luke mentioned. And at the top of this list, I think, is a lack of social skills. I think that can be directly attributed to the overuse of social media in today's society. I think we're so connected through our phones and through social media that we often forget about really talking to each other in person. And I've done it before. You look down at your phone so that you don't have to say hi to the person that's walking across the hall from you, or whatever it may be. But that's exactly what has led us to this point in our generation, in society. We've lost touch, that personal connection with society, and that connection is really how you make friends. It's how you interview for jobs. It's how you network with employers to get those interviews. And so I think that image and that trend in society, that's why millennials are kind of painted in a bad image, is because they've lost this personal connection.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and especially with the networking part of social media is meant for networking. Social networking, I guess, is kind of what it's called in a sense. And so it's good to a certain extent, but it's can get bad. It's kind of using things in moderation is kind of one thing we'll talk about later. Is
Yep.
Social media is good, but too much social media can be harmful and stuff like that. And at the same time, since we are millennials, I do want to defend our generation as well. I don't want to just bash on them the whole show either. So one thing I would say is, while I do think like all these things are true to a certain extent, I do also think it's just in our society today, I think it's really hard to find good people in general, no matter what generation we are talking about. So whether it's the baby boomers, whether it's millennials, whatever generation it may be, whoever we're trying to hire, I think it is hard to hire good people in our society today. I think everyone's kind of gone down the wrong path of maybe not wanting to work, maybe being a little bit lazy, maybe being absorbed by their phones or technology or whatever it may be. It's tough to get people who are tough, who are passionate, who care, who can focus while they're at work. And one thing Dave Ramsey always says is people that work while they're at work and people that don't steal. He says people that work while they're at work, because if you're not working, basically you're getting paid to do nothing, and basically you're stealing for not doing your job. So I think that's one thing that we find in our society is it's really hard to find good people, not just good millennials, but just good people in general.
You have a great point there, Luke, and I think it's really tough to find good employees no matter which generation you're pulling from. It's really tough to find good millennials, but it's also tough to find good people in general. There will always be individuals who are on top of their game, who are smart, motivated, talented. However, on the other side of the spectrum, you'll also always have those people who don't really care, who are really unmotivated to do their work, and so there's really kind of a balance there. And I like how you mentioned that. I don't want to sit here and trash on millennials all day, because I am one. But millennials are different, and I'll admit that their differences are not all bad though. They may want different hours. They want a new environment. They want to make an impact with their work, and they don't want to work that typical 8 to 5 job. That seems kind of boring to them. They're much more in tune, I would say, with other areas of their life, and so they don't want to spend their entire day or their entire lives just working. They want to do other things with their lives as well. And if we allow them, I think, with flexibility in their careers, I think they can still get their work done, but maybe in just a different way than we are used to seeing.
Yeah, I think flexibility is a huge word when it comes to working with millennials, because what you said kind of hit it right on the nose was they kind of want some shorter hours, maybe not shorter hours, but just different hours. Maybe they don't want to come to work until 9 or 10 o'clock, and maybe they want to stay till 6 o'clock, or maybe they want a longer lunch break. And with technology and how it's increased in our society, a lot of these millennials think that they can work from home too. They can think that they have access to their work from wherever. So maybe it's spending more time just around their family. Maybe they're working around them, but they can work from home and work on the go and all those different things. So maybe that's the case that they want as well. And I think this is what makes it really tough on bosses and managers, is because they've been doing these same things for 30 years sometimes of, hey, it's always been 8 to 5 here. You always do your work while you're at work, and you can work at home too, but we want you here from 8 to 5. You get an hour lunch break, and that's how it's going to be. And sometimes these bosses and managers can get into this habit of, this is what we've always been doing, and we don't really want to make any change. But I think that's the biggest problem we're seeing right now, is the bosses and the managers don't want change, and the millennials do want change. And then they come into the workplace, and they kind of just butt heads right away from day one. So that's kind of a thing that I think both parties need to work on. So I think it's managers and bosses can change a little bit. I'm not saying they need to totally revamp their whole work schedule and revamp everything that they do. But then there's also a thing where millennials need to understand where there is a time where you need to be away from your family. There's a time where you need to be at work. There's a time where you need to step away from everything and actually focus on your job while you're at work and all those things. And sometimes you just need to be willing to work a few extra hours to get the job done as well.
Yeah, that's so true. I think millennials are kind of challenging that status quo that we have in the typical professional environment. They want it different, and maybe that's the challenge. That's the big challenge with millennials, and maybe that's why they're sometimes painted in that bad light. But at the same time, millennials really have the potential to be the next generation of future leaders, of future geniuses of their day. They have the potential to build off prior leaders and geniuses of our later generations to become the smartest people on this planet. And they're tech savvy. They understand technology. They work with it. They grew up with it. They're more efficient with technology. They're better able to adapt to unfamiliar circumstances. And I think those things can really benefit millennials, and that's how I think we kind of need to play it as we start to enter into the workforce. And we'll talk a little bit later about the debate of whether you should hire someone with experience or whether you should hire a millennial who's maybe a little bit more efficient with technology and who is able to better adapt to the working environment and to be faster with their work. And so I think that'll be an interesting discussion that we have a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, I think it's so true that we have such a great opportunity as millennials right now of the access to education, the access to knowledge that we have, the technology, everything. We have such a good opportunity to use all that stuff well and efficiently. And sometimes if you compare it to maybe a baby boomer or someone that's a little bit older, we have the opportunity to be a little bit more efficient with the way we work and kind of the differences in the way we work as well. And it's taking advantage of those rather than kind of pushing those to the side that we kind of need to work on a little bit. And I like how Dave Ramsey always sums it up of saying there's two kinds of millennials that are going to enter the workplace, and it's those that are awesome and those that suck. And that's kind of a blunt way to put it, but I would say that's pretty true. You have your millennials that are going to tell you that they want a lot of free stuff and they don't want to work too often, and they want to be on their phones while they're at work. And they'll make it seem like they hit a triple, like he says, when in reality they were born on third base. That's kind of a quote from Dave Ramsey there. But then you'll also have those millennials that you meet that will come into work with their heads up. They're competitive. They have passion for what they do, and they just want to outperform the next person in line. They will outwork a baby boomer 3-1 any day of the week. And he says those are the millennials that I like, and those are the millennials that will truly transform our world, transform the next generation, and build upon that. So if we can just get people in the mindset that we want to be those people that can outwork people 3-1, then I think there's a lot of potential that any millennial has if we can just get that mindset rather than the first one I put forth.
And that goes back to that balance. There's always going to be good employees to hire, but there's always going to be bad employees to hire. And when you necessarily classify someone as a millennial or as a baby boomer, that may not be the best technique to go about doing so. I think you need to hire people based on who they are as a person, their skills, and what they can bring, and not necessarily label them as a millennial or Generation Y or baby boomer or anything like that.
Right. All goes back to grade school where you can't judge a book based on its cover.
Right.
So gotta remember that at all times, and we just gotta remember that when we get out into the real world of work, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit scary, but if we keep the right mindset, I think we can take it on, even as millennials in the society. So I'll do it for the first 15 minutes of the show. When we come back, Austin and I will be discussing how we got to this point with millennials, what is causing this problem, and what ways has society affected millennials. We'll discuss this and much more when we come back. It's 16 minutes past the hour. This is the Weekly Allowance.
Okay, so first thing we're talking about is parenting.
Yep.
And then I have like that data spiel at the end of that segment, I think. That's where I'll dive into that. And then technology.
Yeah.
And then impatience.
Yep.
And then environment.
Environment, yeah.
Millennials love their phones, but hate talking on them.
I think it's so true of like when Simon Sinek says, there's gonna be another song playing. When Simon Sinek says, if you are sitting like in a meeting or in class or something and your phone, or like going out to eat with friends, your phone is on the table, like, and he's like, and you have to check it or you're sitting on your phone when other people are around, he's like, you have a problem.
Yeah.
He just calls it out.
You have a
'Cause
problem.
I've been there. I put my phone right there, but like, yeah, I've been there in a meeting or like IFC. I'm on my phone constantly, like pretty much just 'cause like don't really care, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm gonna say is like I've been guilty of pretty much all these things. Like I
Yeah,
know
I
it's
have
just
too.
like it's okay to be guilty. It's just we need to recognize the problem and find the solution. pretty sweet. You could watch our live stream right now too on YouTube.
Really? Is it going?
Like, I'm not gonna click on it because I'll disrupt the music, but
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
maybe I'll click on it when the music's over and I'll pause or I'll mute the YouTube video.
How much time do you have?
About a minute and a half. I think one thing I'm going to say about parenting is, like, we are not parents. We are not trying to tell you guys how to parent.
That's what I had too. Like, obviously we've never had children, so we don't know what it's like to have that bond.
So we are not telling you. We always had to say that at NSE. We had like a parents talk about, like, hey, you're sending your kids off to college now. This is kind of how you need to, like, be with them, because they're going to change. Like, they're going to come home and they're going to be staying out late, or like maybe they're not going to call you every day or something like that. And I would always have to be like, I'm not a parent. I don't know how to parent. I've never had kids. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a parent.
Yeah.
So I'm not telling you how to parent. I'm giving you suggestions.
Right.
Otherwise, they would
Just
be
suggestions.
They would be livid. Like, the first time we ever did it, they were like, they just kind of looked at us as if, like, what do you know? I was like, okay, we need to change this.
So are you just gonna lead in and then start and on parenting?
Yeah, I can do that. I got about 10 seconds. And we're back here on 91.1 KLPR. This is the weekly allowance. Before we left, I posed that we were going to talk about kind of where we went wrong in society, some of the problems we see, and how we got here, I guess, is really the topic of discussion. And so we have a video that many of you guys have probably seen before. It's by Simon Sinek, and he did a pretty big video that went viral pretty quick, has millions of views on it now, about millennials in the workplace, and kind of breaks it into 4 things that society has kind of done wrong to get us to the place we are now with some of the problems I would say we're seeing with millennials. And so these are just our observations along with the video, and kind of some of our thoughts and our experiences as millennials to go along with the video. So one of the first things that Simon Sinek speaks of is parenting, and kind of the different things along the lines of parenting that may have went wrong raising these millennials. And to start off, I wanted to just say that Austin and I are not parents. We've never had kids. We don't know what it's like to manage children. We don't know what that connection feels like. So we're not telling you guys how to parent. We're not telling you parents out there how to parent. We're just taking things out of this video, and we're just kind of observing them and breaking them down. And so we don't want to tell you guys how to parent because we have never been parents. We're just giving some suggestions, and I just wanted to start out with that. So the number one thing that he kind of said was, we've grown up with parents that have told their kids that they are special and that they can have anything they want simply because they want it. And so there's things that we see these examples of kids that get into honor societies not because they deserved it, but maybe because their parents called and asked and complained. People that got to play varsity sports maybe got to start a varsity sport over someone else because their parents called the coach and complained. Kids that got A's in classes, not because they deserved it, but because the teacher didn't want to deal with the kid's parents. So you see all these things that happened that pretty much resulted from bad parenting practices. Parents that would call in and complain when their kid didn't get a certain award. You see the same thing go on with maybe participation medals. Kids got participation medals for finishing close to last, or maybe even sometimes last. And we see that science has shown that it makes the people that actually deserve the award feel worse, because it kind of diminishes the impact that award has. It diminishes the value that award has. So it makes the person that actually deserved the award feel worse. And it also makes the person that got the award feel bad because they know they didn't actually deserve it. So these are some of the things that we've kind of observed with parenting and kind of with society there, and kind of awarding things that aren't deserved and kind of giving people what they want because they simply want it.
Yeah, so I think we're here. We're at this point in society where society may dislike or even hate millennials for several different reasons, but I think parenting is definitely at the top of that list. And it's tough because obviously we're not parents and we don't have that bond with our children yet. But when we give our children everything that they want in life, it's obviously going to teach them that this is kind of just how life is, and life is not anything like that once you get out into the real world. They got accepted into schools, maybe they got good grades given to them just because they just kind of wanted it. And Luke mentioned a little bit about participation medals. We've learned that they devalue children's morale. They send the message to these kids that even though you didn't win, it's okay because you participated. And that message isn't inherently bad. However, when they get the idea in their mind that they don't have to work hard or get any better because they will just always get a trophy, it can have a devastating impact on their lives down the road when they get to high school and maybe they're trying out for a sports team and they don't make it because they didn't work hard, they didn't put the time in. Or maybe even when you get to college and your professors don't give you an A just because you tried your best on the paper or project that you turned in. And so, we've learned, I know Luke and I have definitely learned this lesson, that life in general is hard, especially in college. It's tough, it's competitive, and the only way to really work through that is to put in the hard work and the time. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to be the best or have the best, talent or be physically talented or anything like that, but you do have to put in the work and the time if you want to have a chance at winning and being successful at this life. And I think what we're teaching our children with these participation medals is that they don't have to necessarily take those learning lessons of, hey, I lost this, I obviously didn't do something, I need to go back, rethink it, redo it, and put the work in to get better. We're not teaching them that lesson. When I was in middle school and I would lose a race in track, or we would lose a game, or maybe I didn't do something very well, I didn't get anything from that. I learned a lesson from that. And so I think that's maybe an unintended impact, a negative impact that we're giving these kids with these participation medals, even though they're meant to be good. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with them. They're meant to be a good thing, but we need to look at those consequences of giving kids participation medals.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Of it can put when you see that maybe you notice that you're not great at a certain thing, or maybe it's you're running track in middle school and you keep getting dead last in these races, and when you're awarded for it, you really don't realize, hey, I'm not really that great at this. Maybe I have a different opportunity somewhere else. So when you're awarded, you don't really realize that opportunity. But when you're not awarded, and maybe you don't get what you want, you realize, hey, maybe this isn't something I'm great at. Maybe there's another opportunity, though. I remember being in middle school, and when I was in 7th grade, it came basketball season. I really wanted to be on the A team for basketball, and I thought I was a good basketball player, and I was all right. I was a good shooter, but I couldn't really play much defense. But that's a whole nother story for another show. But when it came down to it, when they were selecting teams, I got selected on C team. And I was kind of devastated at first. I was like, I felt like I really deserved it, whatever. Went home, kind of complained to my parents. I was like, I really felt like I deserved it. And my parents really sat me down and they said, you know what? Like, maybe you didn't deserve it. I mean, we love you to death and we think you're a great basketball player, but maybe you're better at different things. And that's where I discovered where I'm actually a lot better at golf. I'm better at school. I'm better at writing papers, different things like that. I realized I was much better at those things than I was at basketball, because if my parents would have called the school and said, hey, Luke deserves to be on A team for this, and this, it wouldn't have helped me realize that I have potential in different places. So that's a big thing of, we thrust these millennials or these kids that have been parented this way into the real world, and they've learned growing up that I really wanted to be on A team, so therefore I was on A team because of my parents. Now I really want this job, so I should be able to have this job. I really don't want to work, so I shouldn't have to work. We kind of set those mindsets in front of our kids.
Yeah, I think we're eventually going to learn what we're good at, but it's the idea of when we're going to learn that lesson in life. Do we want to learn it early, or do we want to learn it when we're getting into our careers and all of a sudden realize that we're not very good at a particular area? And I think this example can be kind of highlighted with the financial career field and really any discipline in general, but especially for the financial industry. Finance is extremely competitive. Only the best and brightest work on Wall Street, and to think kind of, how do I get here? How do I work on Wall Street someday? You have to put the time and the effort in order to eventually succeed and get to that point. And I say work on Wall Street, but that really means just, anything successful, being successful within your career. And so, I think these millennials are really finding out that the real world is tough. It will crush you if you give it the opportunity. And so it will not give you a paycheck for just participating. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I take away is, yes, you may be getting a participation medal in this or whatever you're doing, but once you get out into the real world, life is not going to just reward you for participating. You have to show up, you have to be disciplined, you have to put in the time and the effort in order to be successful.
Yeah, and I like what you said, that it's so important to learn that from a young age, whether it's in elementary school, middle school, or high school. Learning that before you get to college, and learning that especially before you get to the workplace is so important, because if you don't learn that until you get your first job, it can be so hard and so demanding at first, and it can really stress you out. So it is important to learn all those things from a young age. That'll take us to our next point of technology. And kind of to start it off with a study or a little stat is, in the 2012 study, Harvard research scientists reported that talking about oneself through social media activates a pleasure sensation known as dopamine. And this is the same sensation that we get when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. And we know dopamine, which comes from the brain when all these activities happen, we know that it's very addictive. Just like the other three things above, smoking, drinking, gambling can become very addictive because of the high levels of dopamine that come from it. So when we use social media and the dopamine also gets activated, whether we get a friend request, whether we get a favorite or a like or whatever it may be, that dopamine level increases, and therefore we want to use more of that social media. Or when we get a text from one of our best friends that says something that we like, we just want to keep texting and texting and texting, and we want to keep having those dopamine levels increase. And the biggest thing that Simon Sinek says in the video is that we have age restrictions on smoking, drinking, and gambling, but we don't have any age restrictions on social media and cell phones. So we allow these high levels of dopamine to happen during times of young adolescence, and that's something that we kind of see as a problem with technology at a young age.
Yeah, social media has really become a dominant force in today's society, and especially in our lives today. And we're more connected than ever before. We have the ability to connect with anybody, anytime, anywhere, but yet we've become less social as a result of that. And it's really a weird result, kind of a negative impact that we've had in society. But I like how Simon mentioned in his video that if you're sitting in a meeting with your phone on the table, or if you need to check your phone every minute, you're simply addicted to your phone. And that's as simple as that. You have those dopamine levels that you need your phone. If you can't go to sleep without your scrolling through your social media at night, then you're addicted. If you hear your phone buzz and you're in the middle of conversation and you feel the need to check that phone, then you're addicted. It's really as simple as that. And don't get me wrong, I think Luke can attest to this too, but I'm certainly attached to my phone as well. It's something that I've been working on and will continue to work on. I've told myself that anytime I'm in church or I'm at the gym or before class, that I'm just going to put my phone away and I'm not going to look at it, and I'm just going to be there in the moment. And I think that's really helped me just be present. I think that's so important. When you put your phone on the table and you're having a conversation with someone or you're in a meeting, it really sends the message that phone, if that were to go off, that's more important than what you're doing right now, whether you're just having a simple conversation or you're in a meeting. I think that's a really huge message, that when you put that phone down on the table, whether it's facing up or down, you're sending the message that you care more about who's on the other end of that phone or what social media is there than you do about the person sitting across from you on the table.
Yeah, I think we forget so often in life how much being present with other people, how important that is to being successful. And I think attachment can just be such a big issue, and it can become a problem because of the dopamine. I think you think of when people get attached to smoking cigarettes or drinking or gambling, it's because of that dopamine that makes them become attached. So it all comes back to that. Moderation that we talked about earlier, of the case that, for example, gambling isn't bad. Too much gambling is bad. Drinking isn't bad. Drinking too much is bad. Same thing with social media. Social media isn't bad at all, but using social media every minute of every day can be a problem. And so it's what happens with doing that and becoming attached to that pushes us away from those deep, meaningful relationships that I think every human longs for, and that's where loneliness comes from. So when we can put our phone aside, or when we can put all those things aside, we can build those deep, meaningful relationships, because those don't get built over tweeting something or someone liking something or favoriting something or getting a friend request. Deep, meaningful relationships really don't come from those things. They come from personal communication with someone. So if you're at a meeting and you put your phone to the side, it's going to begin with that interaction of, hey, I heard your brother got married this weekend. How was that wedding? I heard your father's not doing too well. I'm praying for him. Something like that. That's where relationships are formed. It's not formed through cell phones and through that social media. Although I think it is a great platform to network and do all those things, there's a time in our lives where we need that personal connection and to be present as well.
That's so true. And I read an interesting article last night in my hotel, a Time magazine called "The Generation of Me, Me, Me," and it said millennials love their phones but hate talking on them. And I think that just illustrates, what we're kind of discussing right now with social media and being social through your phone but not in person. I think we're kind of scared, scares us a little bit to maybe put our phone down and have a conversation with someone maybe we don't know, or to strike up conversation with a stranger. But I think that's so necessary in order to learn those communication skills that you need to go throughout your life. You're going to need to be able to communicate once you get out into the workforce. I know that's every interview that I've ever had for internships or jobs after college. They've asked me about communication and asked me to explain times where I've had to communicate orally or written in order to do something successfully. So it's a skill that we need. And so I would just say start building on that, start working on that, start talking to people, say hi, start making friends, be social without your phone.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like we said at the beginning of the show, is social skills are probably at the top of that list right now on employers' list of what they can't find in millennials. So do whatever you can to make those social skills. I built mine a lot at college because I was a student diplomat, a new student enrollment leader, a chancellor's ambassador. So getting involved in those organizations, I would really push for those, because you get to talk to people and interact with them every single day. Brings us to our next point, which is impatience. And this is a thing where we think of our society today and how instant gratification works and how easily we can get access to everything. So say you want to buy something, you can log on to Amazon, you can get it delivered to you, it'll arrive in a day or two. If you want to find something out, you can Google something and you can find the answer in a matter of seconds. If you want to watch a TV show or watch a movie, you have Netflix and Hulu, you can binge watch a whole TV show in a matter of months. So we think of all these things in our lives that we can get at the touch of a button with instant gratification, and it really hurts us when we find those things in our lives that don't come with instant gratification, that we can't get quickly. So things like love, things like joy, self-confidence, job fulfillment, building wealth, whatever it may be, we see these things and we think, hey, I can get everything else at the click of a button with instant gratification, but these are the things that take time. These things take years to build, and so when we can't find them right away, we become lonely, we become depressed, and we just feel like we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, you make a great point there. I think those things that you mentioned at the end, like building wealth, building relationships, those are the truly important things in this life. And when you don't get rich overnight, and so it takes time to invest and and slowly build your wealth. And so when people try to save and invest and they don't really see any results happening, maybe within the first 2 or 3 weeks, which is unrealistic, they get discouraged and they stop. And I think that's so detrimental to anything they're trying to do, whether they're trying to build wealth, build a relationship, make an impact on their job. You don't learn everything on your job overnight. It takes time to truly understand what you're doing, truly understand the implications that you have in order to make a meaningful impact. And so, yeah, this instant gratification, I think, is a result of changing values in our society and the way businesses have adapted to kind of satisfy those needs. You mentioned, the Amazons, the Googles, the Netflixes of the world. They have all built their businesses around satisfying consumers. And what do consumers want? They want it right now. They want it right away. They want next day shipping. They want to watch that episode right now. And so the changing dynamics of businesses in our society have really adapted to provide consumers what they want. And that's great, but we've started to see kind of those unintended consequences and effects taking place on consumers.
Yeah, I think it's really just a matter of realizing the differences between what we can get instantly and what we can't get instantly. And just so once we observe the differences between those two things, we can come to kind of understand it a little bit more. Because I love Netflix, I love Hulu, I love Google, I love Amazon, I love all those things. I love how we can have access to things very quickly. But I also realize that there's some things in life that will not come quickly and that do take time. So if we can just understand that, and so when we get that first job maybe, I always think of myself as a teacher, like that first year probably isn't going to be the best year. It's probably going to be pretty stressful. It's going to be a lot of work, but the years to come are going to be very fulfilled, I think, and I think I'm going to have a lot of joy doing it. So that's one thing kind of I think in my personal life, but yeah, we just need to understand kind of the difference between those two things. Taking us on to our next topic, kind of the last topic in this segment of the environment that we're raised in, the environment that we're pushed into after college, the environment that we're pushed into as millennials. And I think of kind of the workplace in a sense. There's a lot of workplaces that we go into, there's a lot of managers, a lot of bosses that focus on the numbers, the results, deadlines. They focus on all these things going on in their company, but they fail to focus on the actual person that they are working with. So it's a big thing of the environment that we're getting pushed into isn't always we don't always find fulfillment in the environment that we're pushed into because of these certain things. And we live in a society that focuses a lot on results and a lot on demands and stuff. And that's a thing as millennials, we want to make a difference. We want to be respected first before we start doing those results, I guess.
Yeah, and we can't blame the businesses, right? They perform, they do business based on data, and they need that data to make sure that they are meeting their metrics and providing for their shareholders and everything like that. But I think it would be so interesting, and I actually think we are kind of starting to see this, the emphasis on employees and on the people who are doing these jobs, and starting to train them and to really put investing in them in order to do business. And because they are just pushed into those jobs right out of college, and they're required to perform. And so I think if we want to build a successful business, you need obviously good people. And so I would say take advantage of these millennials that are coming out and teach them the values of hard work and patience that they may not have learned up until this point in their lives. But the good thing is that you can, as a leader and as a business leader, you can harness that potential and really reap the benefits of their technology, of their ability to adapt and everything like that. And so I think they're in a good position to really help out and to be successful in the business world.
Yeah, and I think that's what scares a lot of employers is like millennials. They think that they don't want to meet deadlines or that they don't want to perform results, and they do. I think every millennial wants to perform well and they want to do a good job. They just want to be respected at the same time. I think we think of things in maybe an older generation. If you could just lay a project down on someone's desk and say, hey, do this, with no thanks, no praise, nothing like that, and they would just get the job done. And I mean, it's easy to do that, but we now realize that we need some thanks, we need some praise, we need to be told that we're doing a good job, because there can be a lot of pressure within that first job and things like that. So just something that employers need to recognize there. And we wish it was different. We wish that we could have been raised kind of like older generations. We wish that parents could have done a better job maybe, or that society could have done a better job, but they didn't. So now it's on companies, now it's on employers to have an impact on those young adults and to pick up the slack where it was.
Yeah, and so I have an interesting article that I read last night that kind of does a good job of summing all of these things up and really provides some statistics and some data that goes along with it. And so I'll just read you this quote from from Time magazine that says, "The incidence of narcissistic personality disorder is nearly 3 times as high for people in their 20s as for the generation that's now 65 or older, according to the National Institute of Health. 58% of college students scored higher on narcissism scale in 2009 than in 1982. Millennials got so many participation trophies, as we mentioned before, growing up, that a recent study showed that 40% believe they should be promoted every 2 years, regardless of how they perform in the workplace. Their development is stunted. More people ages 18 to 29 live with their parents than with a spouse, according to a 2012 study by Clark University. And they're lazy. In 1992, the nonprofit Families and Work Institute reported that 80% of people under 23 wanted one day to have a job with greater responsibility, but 10 years later, only 60% did. And so I think that article from Time really does a good job of summarizing some of the things that we've talked about and really putting some data behind it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good statistics there. One that jumped out at me was they believe that they should have a promotion every 2 years, and that's kind of that instant gratification again, where it comes back to that of I constantly want to be satisfied over and over and over again, and sometimes there's just going to be those years that you're going to work as much as you can, and there might not be that promotion at the end, and that's just the way life is. So yeah, thanks for bringing those stats, and thanks for bringing that article into play there. We're going to take a short break here. When we come back, Austin and I will be discussing where can millennials go from here and what employers can do in our society to help them. Stay tuned to hear our solutions. It's 48 minutes past the hour. This is the Weekly Allowance. One song.
Yeah.
That was one thing. I knew it was going to be. Like, I just knew because there's a lot of content there, but it's all good stuff to talk about. So.
Yeah. And I don't have a ton for this last one, but I do have like a pretty good gosh, I was just writing this last night and
Inspired.
I have
I'm just gonna go through some of my points. Like I have 6 points, but I won't hit on them.
I have a little segment that could be included in an English paper. It's pretty. It's good. I'll have to listen to it, but it's kind of talking about
And we can always go over 4 o'clock if we need to.
Yeah.
So.
I don't think we'll need to, but.
Zach Kane's did a great job on the Weekly Allowance today.
Do you have an iPad charger or a phone charger?
I don't.
I don't really need it. Instant gratification, man. I need everything right now.
Need it now.
Dude, what I think about too is when you're on a computer and something's not going, you're like, this needs to go right now.
Yeah.
You'll close out of it and go,
You're so upset, yeah. Patience, man.
It's all about patience.
It's my dad is almost 57 years old, and he's super impatient.
Really?
He's driving in traffic, gotta be there quick, so.
Oh, man,
but you see it a lot more in our society.
I think you just need to be aware of you can't get stressed out over that stuff.
Exactly. That's the things that's what I said a lot, was just realizing the differences. You just gotta realize the difference between watching Netflix and getting a promotion. There's big differences between loving someone and whatever the case may be, but ordering something off Amazon, they can't be the same.
Yeah.
Psychologically. Got about a minute.
Oh man.
Def's getting some canes this weekend. Leaving tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Going to Riverside with the Reds tonight.
Really?
Yeah.
Good meal. Special occasion, or are they just going?
They're just going. Got to use up that monthly balance. And
Yeah. How much is that? How much a month do you spend? Like,
I think it's 65 or 70, I think.
oh really?
Mhm.
That's more than that.
Something like that. Maybe it's 75, but usually feeds like 4 people pretty well.
Yeah.
Or 3 people with drinks. 15 seconds. And we're back with the weekly allowance on 91.1 KLPR. So we've thrown a lot of stuff at you on the show today. We've thrown a lot of issues and problems and things that we as millennials have seen kind of go wrong in our society today. And now we kind of want to give you a solution, or what we can do and what good is to come. We want to end the show on a positive note. And so to start off, I kind of just want to talk about what we can do as employers, what employers can do to help millennials out. And I think it is really summed up in one sentence, and it is important to lead millennials instead of manage them. Millennials have been getting managed for their entire life. They're literally, since they were born, they've been told what to do, how to do it, whether it was by their parents, whether it was through school, whether it was in college. They've been told what to do and how to do it for a long time, and few times they've been led. So when they get onto that workplace, they're kind of in a sense tired of getting told what to do. Obviously, with work, you are going to have to be told what to do, but I think it's important to lead them in the right direction and don't always micromanage them. That's something that can really steer a millennial away and really make them feel pressured when there's someone constantly over their shoulder telling them the exact way it has to be done, rather than just leading them in the right direction and giving them a little freedom to do what they want.
Yeah, and I think another thing that goes along with that is just understanding this new generation. They're going to be a little bit different. They're not going to do everything the way it's always been done in the past. And so I think employers have to really adapt to fit the needs of millennials, so that they can have the greatest impact on their business and in the world. They have access to the best education. They grew up in a world immersed with technology. They're adaptive, and they're at the point in their lives where they're really entering the workforce and beginning their careers. And so employers are in a great position to take advantage of that potential and really harness it to be successful.
Yeah, and I think we have to show millennials respect, and I think it goes both ways. Millennials need to show their bosses and employers respect. Employers and bosses need to show millennials respect as well. And we need to give both parties attention as well. So if you're a boss or you're a manager and you're managing a millennial in society, you have to give them some attention, and you have to tell them if you lay a big project on their desk, say, hey, this is an idea I think you'd be good at doing. I'd really appreciate if you could do it. Kind of go on your own timeline. Here's a deadline where I would like it to, but kind of do what you need to do. I'm kind of going to give you free reins on this, but I'd really appreciate it. And kind of giving them that thanks and praise that I was talking about earlier, and giving them that attention that they need and they kind of deserve as well, because no longer can we just ask them to do things and then really never follow up on it and never really thank them for it either. I think that's a thing we've kind of lost touch with, is thanking people for little things, and that can go a long ways.
Yeah, they kind of need that reassurance that they're on the right track, that they're doing their work the way that it's supposed to be done. And I agree with the point that you need to give them free range. I think if you tell them exactly how to do it, it kind of limits their creativity. And millennials are creative. They're innovative. They've grown up in a world that is technology, and so give them the free reins to take a project and just do it, how they see fit. And it might be a little bit different, but that's okay. And I think that's so important to say please and thank you. I know in leadership roles that I have, it's so important to appreciate when people do work for you. and to make sure that you're saying please and thank you. I think that's so important.
Yeah, and it can sometimes just be that the structure maybe that the employer provides for the millennial. And I once saw something where it said you need to treat their decisions and treat their work more like if it were to be performed maybe on like a racetrack or a horse racetrack or something like that, rather than like a narrow hallway. So when you think of like a horse race, the track is there and it has rails along the sides to keep the horses contained, but they also have a little bit of range to run with and a little bit of range to move with. But when you give them maybe like a narrow hallway where only maybe two people can walk, then you're giving them all these boundaries of you can only work inside of these measurements and this is the specific way you need to do things. So I think maybe giving them a little bit broader range and giving them that horse track or racetrack rather than maybe a narrow hallway to work through, and giving them a little bit of that free range, kind of what I was talking about, rather than micromanaging.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about what employers can do. Now we want to kind of change gears a little bit and talk about what millennials can do. Luke, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm a big thinker of having a vision, having a passion, and then being decisive. I think if millennials can do those three things, of they can have a vision, where do you want to go, have a passion, why do you want to do what you are doing, and then being decisive about it, saying, hey, I've weighed my options, this is my decision, this I do or don't want to do this, I like this, I don't like this, and just being able to tell yourself that. Have a why. I think that's a big thing as a millennial, is just have a reason for why you're doing what it is, what you do. If that reason falls under, I want to make a lot of money, or I want to have a lot of success, sometimes that's not the best reason to do certain things, but find that why and find why you're passionate about what you're passionate about, and really work with that. I would say that's probably my number one thing with millennials.
I love that. So I was sitting in my hotel room last night, kind of pondering what I wanted to talk about during this part of the show. And so I'm just going to read you a little bit about what I wrote down last night. Okay, so here's a little bit more rounded picture of millennials than maybe the one that we started with the data and the negative image. Millennials are earnest and they're optimistic. They embrace the system. They're pragmatic idealists. They're tinkerers. They're dreamers. They're life hackers. Their world is so flat that they have no real leaders. And this is why revolutions and ideas, political or otherwise, are often challenged. They want constant approval and reassurance. They post photos on their social media for reassurance, and they need that sometimes. They have massive fear of missing out, and they have their own acronym for everything, including FOMO. They're passionate. They want to work in a place with purpose. They want to make an impact. They challenge the status quo and the boundaries of a normal career. They're socially awkward in a society that is more social than ever before, but that's okay because they can just send you an email. They're normal. They face the challenges that every other generation has faced before them. And so, yes, we all have that data, that negative data about narcissism, laziness, and entitlement, but a generation's greatness isn't determined by its data, it's determined by how the people react to those challenges. And I think that's just as important is how we react to those challenges. Whether you think millennials are the greatest new generation of optimistic entrepreneurs or a group of around 80 million people about to explode because their views and their success is largely dependent upon how you view them. I want to be optimistic, and I want to be positive to think that we are the generation of the future and that we're going to bring change to this world, positive change, unlike anything that prior generations have ever seen before.
Yeah, and that's all well put, spoken like a true president, I would say. And that those are all great points, and something that we can all always remember, and something that should motivate millennials, that we are the future. We are the future generation. We're the ones that are either going to make or break this economy. We're the ones that are going to make or break the workplace. We're going to do all these things, and if we need to do them differently, that's okay. If that's going to help us out, if that's going to make us more efficient, different isn't always bad. And I like a thing that you said about just progress, or What's your potential? I think that's a big thing to look at with millennials is where's the potential at? How far can we go? I think too often we define people based, kind of like judging the book based on its cover, and we too often look at where a person is in their life and we don't look at the potential that they have. And I think that's one thing we need to look at with millennials is we have the ability to be one of the most efficient generations ever. And if we can just keep that in mind, I think we can be so successful and we can really push our society to a whole new level.
Yeah, and so that kind of does it for our show today. Hopefully we're able to talk about and explain who millennials are and how they interact in the workplace and some of the implications that go along with that. Hopefully we were able to kind of illustrate how we got to this point in society where maybe we're not too fond of millennials, or we even have a bad image of millennials in our minds. We talked about parenting, we talked about technology, impatience, and environment, all leading to those negative aspects there. And lastly, we talked about and gave some ideas on where we can go from here. And I think there's so much potential to do great things in this world from here until we grow up and new generations are coming up before us. And I think how we deal with that is going to be different. It's going to be unique, but I think there's so much potential for positive things, positive change, and I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah, I can honestly say this has been one of the best shows I've done so far.
Yeah.
Really entertaining and speaking from experience. I think this is something we can both speak on, and I think this is the perfect topic for college students to listen to. So I hope that we can shoot this out today and we can get some listens on our SoundCloud and on our podcast. Thanks for all of you that tune in live. I want to thank you there. But that does it for this episode of the Weekly Allowance. I encourage you to tune in next Friday at 3 o'clock to hear about our next topic. And in the meantime, whether you are young or old, don't put your future on hold.